Welcome everyone. We are really excited to have you all for this event. We are proud to be hosting it with our partners, Black Girls Vote, as well as NAMI and the National Director of Higher Heights and the Higher Heights organization, and Dr. Shamel Bell of the Debt Collective and a lecturer at Harvard University. Welcome to this event. We are extremely excited to be hosting an event that is based in and around Black women's student debt, as well as the policy issues and the framework that will allow us to be able to rise above that student debt, that will allow student borrowers to actually have an opportunity to not only advance their careers, but also be able to not be saddled with the student debt load and the burden that they currently are, that is preventing them from moving on with life, being able to afford homes, being able to provide and sustain their families, and actually walk into a society that is a more level playing field and a more equitable playing field for those degree holders and those who are working to get those degrees. We know that they matter in society, and we want to make sure that the standing point, the voices of those who are on the front lines and those who are graduates, as well as borrowers who have not graduated yet, and even borrowers who didn't make it across that stage, have a fair shot at an equitable future. So we're extremely excited that you all are here to join us. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the fearless leader, our interim CEO right here at the Education Trust, Denise Ford.
Thank you so much, Amisha, and good evening, everyone, to all who are joining. I have it on good intel that even my dear friend from Dakar, Phyllis Jeffers, is joining us as well. So I'm so happy that you're here from across the country in DC, and yes, from Senegal. You know, we have amazing partners who have joined us this evening, so I have to give them a shout out. Black Girls Vote, Higher Heights, and the National Alliance for Mental Illness all have joined us for this very important conversation on how student loan debt impacts Black women. We are indeed a nation in crisis. Americans owe a staggering, and this is mind-blowing, folks, $1.75 trillion in student debt, and that number continues to grow. And Black borrowers are impacted the most. Our community knows that a college degree is the surest path to strongest employment opportunities, a shot at a brighter future, in the creation of our own very personalized version of the American dream. But due to a lack of familial wealth and well-documented economic opportunity gaps, we are often forced to take on more debt to pay for higher education. And we as Black women, we sit at the intersection of racism and misogyny. So it should be no surprise that we carry the highest student loan burden, honestly, and we graduate to a job market that offers us fewer opportunities and lower salaries. In fact, today, Black women with a bachelor's degree earn about the same as a white man with a high school diploma. Lower salaries exacerbate the racial wealth gap, making it harder to repay our student loan debt. And in 2019, the median Black household wealth was a mere $24,100 compared to more than $188,000 for white households. And as I just shared with you, for single Black women, these statistics are particularly dire. And we all feel this deeply because our financial health and mental health are always intrinsically linked. As a recent EdTrust release shows, the stress of carrying a heavy student debt burden, it is taking a serious toll on the mental health of many Black borrowers. And that's cause for alarm. We need to ring some bells. Fortunately, the push for student loan debt relief isn't only being led by advocacy organizations, but also by elected leaders like Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, Reps Cori Bush, Senator Ralph Warnock, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and various CDC members, to name a few. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has signaled its support for a plan that would provide $10,000 in student loan cancellation. And it's currently also considering another extension of the student loan repayment pause that's currently in effect. While every bit helps, let's make no mistake, these proposals are just not enough to move the needle for thousands of Black borrowers looking for real relief that's going to level the playing field. So let's make no mistake, rally cries to correct systemic racism are often met with resistance. Solving this issue will take enough people having enough courage to do what's right. And it's going to take fierce advocates like all of you who are joining us tonight from across the country. You should join us in demanding action. But for tonight, I really look forward to a very dynamic conversation, and I want to work with you as we press for change. Next up, I am excited to have here with us this evening someone who I have great respect for, someone who I watched when I was a Hill staffer and watched with awe all the time. She led the fight on behalf of Black women and girls in Congress. Please welcome New Jersey's U.S. Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman, who is the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bonnie Watson-Coleman, co-founder and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls and a sponsor of the Building a Black Woman Best legislative agenda. I want to thank Denise Fort and all of EdTrust for inviting me to say a few words here today and for their dedication to closing racial equity gaps in education and lifting up the issue of how student debt is affecting Black borrowers, especially women. The topics that you'll be discussing today, the student loan debt held by Black women and its impact on the borrower's mental health, are both near and dear to my heart and are issues that I regularly work on in my capacity as a legislator. I won't go into the details of the crisis, as I'm sure the panelists will address them, but the combined impacts of sexism and racism have put Black women who seek higher education at a terrible disadvantage. They face hurdles in attaining the prerequisite education to prepare them for college in our grossly underfunded elementary, middle, and high schools, and their families often lack the resources to pay for school without accruing significant student loan debt. A lack of resources prevents many Black women who start college from completing their studies, leaving them with mountains of debt without the income-boosting degree to pay it back. And these students who do earn their degrees face both the gender pay gap and the racial pay gap. This year, Black Women's Equal Pay Day is September the 21st. The average Black woman must work all of 2021 and up to September 21st of this year to make sure that what they make equals what their white male counterparts made in 2021 alone. After 20 years, the typical Black borrower still owes 95% of their student loan debt, despite Black women being the most educated demographic in the United States. You know, we've been told for decades that education is the great equalizer, but clearly what we're doing here is not enough. All these factors combine to place a tremendous burden on the mental health of Black women. Financial insecurity, as we know, is an enormous source of stress and mental anguish for Black families on top of the racism that we face. Is it any wonder that Black people manifest this stress as higher than average rates of high blood pressure, hypertension, and other stress-related health issues? We've seen suicide among young Black people skyrocket, while it has fallen among their non-Black peers. Black families routinely lack access to mental health services. Our young people are in schools that may have a counselor in on Mondays, but what happens when there's a crisis on Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday? We need to invest in initiatives that increase access to mental health services, and we need to invest in training young people with the cultural competency they need to understand and to help Black boys and girls, men and women. The Biden-Harris administration has begun to address student loan debt, having canceled $15 billion in loan debt for roughly 675,000 borrowers and kept in place the pause on student loan repayments. But broader relief is needed. By applying the Black Women Best economic framework and centering Black women in the policy making, we can enhance the economic foundations of Black women and other marginalized groups, thus strengthening the economy for everyone. The first step is replacing the debt-based higher education system. Countries around the world are investing in their young people, preparing them to take over the reins, not exploiting them and placing them in a lifetime of debt that limits their potential. We need broad-based debt cancellation and reform and reinvestment in higher education. And educated people are a benefit to the entire society. If my neighbor's child gets an education, opens a business, and helps his community or her community, I benefit from that education. It's a public good, and it should be treated as such. This will require looking at higher education the way we look at a high school education. This is a change we've made before. Before the 1820s, free public education schools did not exist in the United States. Today, every child has access to a publicly funded education. It was because we recognized that education was a public good. Well, if an elementary school education was a public good in the 17th century and a high school education was a public good in the 19th century, surely we can imagine a 21st century in which publicly funded university and trade school educations are a public good. The impact of this transformation will benefit everyone. But as I've shown, and I'm sure today's panel discussion will expound upon it, it will have a profound impact on the prospects of Black women and help bring them from peril to prosperity. Thank you for your good work, and God bless.
Amazing. I was going to say the Congresswoman pretty much stole my job as moderator tonight, but we do want to give thanks to Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman and her staff, as well as obviously the interim CEO of the Education Trust, Ms. Denise Ford. Moving on, before we get really started, I want to first of all, make sure that everyone knows that we do have a chat box that is open. So as you have questions that arise during the panel or our upcoming student borrower spotlight, please be sure to put those questions in the chat box, and we will get to them for both the panel as well as the student borrower as we continue our program. As we just heard from both Denise Ford as well as the Congresswoman, there are a plethora of issues related to why Black women have the student debt burden that they actually do. Most of that is inequities in our society. With that being said, we chose to highlight a student borrower who has had the experience, who can speak to a lot of the issues that we just heard from the Congresswoman as well as from Denise Ford, who is a student who not only made it through, but also has a very interesting story to tell about the burden that she faced as a student parent, as well as a student borrower who was promised a lot of things, but didn't necessarily see all of those things come to fruition. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our student borrower spotlight, Velma Moriera.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Velma. I am from Massachusetts. I am a student borrower. I am a parent of 4 children at the time. I attended ITT Tech, I attended Elizabeth Grady, and I attended Everest Institute. I wanted to become a massage therapist. I wanted to become an esthetician. It was 2 careers that I felt was something that was going to give me the stability that I needed having kids and being a single parent. When I went over to do my paperwork, a lot of the things that were offered to me and a lot of the things that they told me I was gonna go ahead and get in the meantime, I was a massage therapist and an esthetician, were things that I never saw. I was promised basically good income, stability, time with my children, which is the most important thing that it's to me. And as the years went by after I graduated, I never saw anything like that. I never saw the income that they promised. But in the meantime, I did see my the loans that just high rising, and just the amount of money that I was owing them without me obtaining the career that I was promised. It was nerve-wracking. The interest continue rising on the interest continue rising on the loans, and it just took me to, of course, like the stress, the depression, the anxiety of how I'm going to maintain my children, how I'm going to be able to support myself, maintain my bills, and do everything that I have to do for me to be able to provide for my kids as a single parent. Unfortunately, again, I never saw that income. The sacrifices that I was making were amazing. I was jumping from job to job, trying to find that income that I was promised, trying to find the employer that would see me for what I was looking for and for what I was worth. My belief has always been work hard and teach my kids what is it exactly that you could get if you work hard and you are responsible for your own life. But I guess, the system is not built for me. It's not built for my children as a Black woman. And it's unfortunate. But at the same time, I still can't give up. I'm still now enrolled in school after it's still owing. At first it was $15,000 from just Everest. And then of course the Elizabeth Grady, both of them together were $24,000. Even though part of my loan was forgiven by the student borrower, I still have more to work with. And it's still a stressful situation just to believe that, interest is still building up and I still don't have the career that I was looking for. I'm currently enrolled to become a social worker. So I'm currently enrolled again in school, again, because I couldn't pursue the career, that I couldn't find the career that I was promised. So now I have to go back to school at 36 years old, 4 kids, still single parent, still having dreams, because I just can't give up. Me giving up is me giving up on my children, me giving up on my dreams. And that's a no-no. Not the system is going to stop me. No loans is going to stop me. No just discrimination. It doesn't matter what it is. I feel like we all need equality. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what language you speak. And it's something that I'm going to continue pursuing. It's going to be something that I'm going to continue teaching my children. And that's about it.
Velma, your story is impactful in so many ways. As you noted, not 1, not 2, but 3. 3 for-profit institutions, 3 institutions that were in large part designed not only to target, but to manipulate African Americans and largely African American women into attendance and into these very high interest loan settings with promises of strong careers on the other end that never fully matriculated. As someone who experienced a level of student debt forgiveness, how does it feel now? And you've decided that even though you were done wrong by multiple institutions, that you're going to continue your education. How does it feel to know that you got partial forgiveness? And what does that mean for you? And what is your stance for students who are seeking forgiveness now, even those who didn't go to for-profit institutions?
Oh man, see, I wish this whole student forgiveness loans will go for everyone that's out there that have gotten a loan. It doesn't matter if you did get your education or not. The high interest, it's amazing. And in a blink of an eye, it just continues high rising. Like, it doesn't matter. It sits there and they're collecting more money off of you. And in the meantime, even if you got a career, you know, you still got to pay all of that. And in the meantime, they still taking taxes off of your pay. They still taking, you know, a lot of your income that you're still working hard for. So I hope that with the same way I got student forgiveness, at least partial from the borrower's defense, I wish everybody could just as well get it, because it's a struggle. It's a struggle. It's hard for the mental stability, knowing how you're gonna repay it. See if they're not gonna take your taxes at the beginning of the year when you file, you know, because you're not paying. So, or putting them in deferment all the time because you can't afford them, or because, like me, I had to stop paying for a while because I couldn't afford it. So I just hope and pray that it goes for everyone, not just a partial group of people, but everyone that really needs it.
And before we move into our panel discussion, I did have another question for you as it relates to being a student parent, going through that experience, which is unique in the sense that there are so many more cost burdens that are part of that process than it is for students who are not student parents going through the college process. What was your experience like there? I know that you had initially mentioned in conversation pre this event about how you had to make certain decisions or that your kids weren't able to do or have certain things because you were still trying to focus on paying bills that included the student loans, but also just cost of living bills, and what that was like for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had to pick and choose what activities my kids were going to do for school, or what were they going to do for the summer camp, or if they were going to go to summer camp, or if we was going to go to the beach on a weekend because I didn't have no gas money, or because I didn't have the food for me to like at least cook something before we go to the beach. It's so many, even the littlest things you think that don't matter, it does matter, because everything costs money. Every single thing costs money. And it was one of the things that I had to, for years, keep like figuring out how I was gonna do it with my kids, because I started with one, and then of course now I have four, and I'm back in school again. So it's a stressful situation. It's still like, just to think about what am I gonna do later on when I do start, you know, getting those loans again. Now that I thank goodness I have a lawyer, I'm gonna start, you know, teaching my daughter that's already 17 and is already a senior in high school, how we're going to be managing this paperwork, and how we're going to pay attention to the littlest things of contracts of entering a student loan, you know, for her not to go through that, and for her kids not to go through that. So it's just little things like that that actually could jeopardize, you know, anyone's future.
Thank you so much, Velma, for sharing your story. For all who are listening, our guests, we want to make sure again that you are here to ask questions. So if you have anything for Velma, please put it in the chat box. We will ask her those questions later. We're going to have her stick around. Right now, we're going to introduce our panel. This is a panel of experts who will be speaking on not only the student debt crisis, but also policy measures that are needed to be put in place to make sure that we eradicate the current student loan debt before they're not in the same place 5, 7, 10 years from now. Because at the rate we're going, it shows no signs of stopping. On our panel, we have 4 wonderful Black women, starting with Natasha Murphy, the Chief of Staff for Black Girls Vote, Lakila Stemmons, the National Director for Higher Heights, Dr. Shamel Bell, she is with the Debt Collective. She is also a lecturer at Harvard University. And filling in for Don Brown is Irma Sinclair from NAMI. To start, I want to get a little bit of reactions from what we just heard in terms of student debt. And I will start with you, Lakila. Do you have any reaction to what we just heard from our student borrower?
You know, absolutely. And I think it's the reality that Black women for so long have had to be the defenders and the caregivers of our families. And while we all know the economic impact that, you know, having service jobs or being in professions that don't pay us the equal pay of our counterparts, especially when you look at Black women's equal pay, like Black women's inequity in pay, it literally shines a light on what we have all seen during a COVID pandemic, right? Like, for instance, during the pandemic, many of us had to make a choice. Do we go to work? Do we care for our children? What does it look like for someone who is facing an insurmountable amount of college loans and debt? And you're looking at, is my job going to close because we work for a nonprofit? Like, do I give all my all to my job, or do I look for a second job, or do I make sure I stay home to keep my family safe? Like, I don't think people understand the pressure emotionally, physically, financially that Black women are continually facing in this economic, situation, or fighting multiple pandemics. We're fighting a COVID pandemic. We're fighting inequity in pay. We're fighting racism. We're fighting sexism. We're fighting to stay alive and to protect our families. And all these things are literally things that we are fighting. And many are invisible because people don't want to recognize it. So my heart goes out to her. And I think one of the things that we can do is have more conversations like this, where we can talk about resources, when we can talk about answers and solutions, and be in community and conversation in a safe space, so that we can really, really get down to how do we make it better for the next generation, right? Like, we all should not still be having our children or our grandchildren go through the things that we went through. We have to find solutions. And I want to applaud you for having this, convening this conversation, because this is the start of it. This is how we start making a difference and ensuring that future generations have a way to fight and get out of this situation, because education is going to be the key, but we don't get it until we start talking.
Thank you, Lakila. And thank you so much for also bringing in the stressors of the pandemic, because we do not want to forget that in this conversation, not only as it relates to student borrowers, but also just recognizing the mental health toll that has taken on so many people, in addition to just basically fighting to keep their heads above water, even though there's a payment pause. Just that friction around what happens when it ends, and the extension over and over again, but then not knowing whether another extension is coming. There is a serious fear, specifically amongst Black women and Black women borrowers, as well as those who are trying to raise their families in the midst of this. What is going to happen next? And I think that was greatly spoken to by our student borrower here, Velma, who just spoke a minute ago, but also as it relates to what's happening now with a lot of women who've expressed that concern, quite frankly, across multiple platforms. Dr. Shamel Bell, you have been shaking your head here, nodding your head in support. What are your thoughts? Again, we just heard from a student borrower. I know that you work with the Debt Collective, and you've been an outspoken voice on this issue for quite some time. What are your thoughts?
Wow, I'm over here jotting down notes and just learning that exactly what you said, our connection, our story, our united front, that's our power. So I was just writing down all of the things that I resonated with. And as a student borrower myself, $250,000 to become this PhD and this Harvard professor. And so some of the things that really stood out to me is that we need to tell our stories. There's a lot of guilt and shame that this society wants to put on us to keep us at this lower, frequency, so that we won't fight, that we won't stand up, that we won't operate in our full power. So if we're all experiencing this guilt and this shame, and then especially when our basic needs are not met, so that's the true conversation. Education should be free, right? It's a right. However, we're doing all of these things in order to get these jobs when, they keep moving the goalpost, and for Black women in particular, we have like this double-edged sword, because I don't know if anyone else has experienced that Black men sometimes resent us for getting the level of education. And I even heard someone say, oh, this is another reason for Black women to, look down on us if we get the student loan debt forgiven. Like, who said? If we, free Black women of this debt, then all of us will have the benefit of being free, and like the resources and the positive implications. So, I'll talk more about it later, but just the the shame and the guilt that we release in our stories. And, the Debt Collective, we do these debtors assembly. We have one coming up for Black women in particular and their supporters. So I will definitely give you all information on that later, but thank you all for sharing your stories, because it releases that shame and that guilt and bring us to, acceptance, but also not acceptance of the situation, but acceptance that the education is free and that we have the ability to make sure that we cancel it, not forgive it. It's canceled for all of us.
I know that Natasha Murphy, Black Girls Vote, has been having a little bit of video issues, but I did want to pull you in here for conversation as well. I know that Black Girls Vote has been working on the forefront here in terms of elevating this issue, not only to those who are considering running for office who are women, but also making sure that those who are currently in office are really utilizing their voices to ensure that the elevation of this policy issue and the framework around debt forgiveness and what it means specifically for Black women is at the forefront. What are some of your comments?
Yes, thanks so much, Jamisha. And so sorry I can't join you all on video, but like you mentioned, this has been an issue that Black Girls Vote has been elevating. As an organization, we have collegiate chapters across the Mid-Atlantic region, and one of the primary issues that are facing our collegiate members, leaders, and their peers is the mounting student loan debt crisis, the burden and anxiety that they have around funding their education. They shared with us that it follows them not just during their academic career, but beyond. So you have freshman students who have expressed feeling trapped, feeling like they've signed their life away or their family's economic future away just to finance, 4 years of education. You have matriculating students who are always so anxious about how they're going to pay for the next semester. Do they need to take summer courses? They just want to get the education so that they can enter the workforce. And then we've had graduating seniors who take jobs that don't align with their passion or their purpose, just to ensure that they are able or in a financial position to start making payments at that 6-month post-graduation mark. And so it's been our experience that student loan debt really is that primary policy issue for kind of the next generation of voters. And we have been imparting on those who are running for elected office really at every level, and encouraging them to hear the voices of young people, to take seriously their concerns and some of the broken promises that have been made to them as it relates to financing their education and beyond.
And I could not have this conversation without bringing in NAMI. So I'm very thankful that Irma is here with us today. She is again replacing Don Brown on this panel, who had a last minute event that she had to be a part of. But while we're having this conversation about Black student debt, Black women borrowers, we could not talk about this in good faith without talking about the implications on mental health that this huge financial burden actually has. We heard from Velma earlier as a student borrower how it affected her. I'm sure there are several people on this panel, self included, who have been first generation college students who know exactly what it's like to walk out of college with a degree and still wondering what's going to happen once that student loan bill hits your home. Those are very real things, and we definitely want to bring you into the conversation, Irma, to discuss how this actually affects Black women and Black people when it comes to mental health, taking into account that we don't have in our communities the mental health resources that other communities have. We also have a stigma around mental health in general. What does that look like in practice, and how can we be able to not only get that help, but also elevate the recognition of Black mental health when it comes to student loan debt?
Absolutely. I think just what Natasha was saying, that's the phrase that she said, the broken promises, right? The entire element of a broken promise of college that surrounds the narrative of college for first generation college graduates, which I also am, right, from South Central Los Angeles, right? I am a first generation college graduate, and I was promised, right, this quality of life. Right? It's not just about a better job or a higher paying job. It's a quality of life, not just for me, but also for my family. Right? And so that promise is broken when I leave my family, everything I've ever known, right? To go to a college space, have that culture shock, and then have to then deal with the stressors of debt and the accumulation of debt and anxiety and depression and stigma and isolation, because I was the first one to make the decision to go to this college. college, right? It is an isolating experience, and have to deal with that isolation and that generational responsibility, right? The psychological toll of that is an inhibitor to a quality of life. And so if the promise was to go to college and have an advancement in your quality of life, once you graduate as a first generation college student, you find that promise to be broken, and actually there to be an experience of oppression that meets you after you graduate or after you attend that university. And so then the question becomes, what was it all for, right? You start to have these thoughts, right? And these reconsiderations. And I think that it really needs to be said that mental health is not just about what happens in our mind, but it affects the whole body. So when we talk about mental health in this conversation, we are talking about the holistic health and wellness for Black women, period. That is the conversation that we want to center at NAMI, talking about the intersectional experience for Black women, the intersectional oppression, and the intersectional trauma that Black women in specific are experiencing, and how can we create contextual, relevant ways to reach that community and that demographic. And so just a conversation like this is a part of what we hold up, a community conversation, that is a part of that treatment. Just the idea that I can come here and sit with people who look like me, people who are from where I'm from, literally, right, Dr. Chavelle, from where I'm from, who have some of my experience, that helps to aid in destigmatizing, that helps to aid in kind of combating that isolation, and helps to aid in servicing our mental health and our holistic health as well.
I need some more Southside Chicago people on here, because y'all California folks, there's a lot of
South Central up in here.
No, I think that those points are so very vital and important. And as someone, again, who was a first generation college student, who had an incarcerated parent, who, grew up on welfare, food stamps, you name it. There are so many stories for Black women, because we have the burden, and I think the joy in many cases, of being able to carry our communities, being able to lead our families, being able to do so much with so little. It is often expected that we are playing that superwoman role throughout generations. That's what our grandparents did. That's what our great grandparents did. That is who we are innately. But with that being said, there is also a responsibility of our government, of our institutions, to ensure that we are not consistently fighting, that we are not consistently behind the 8 ball, that we are not consistently spending so much and getting so little in return. So I think that this conversation is extremely important and pertinent, especially right now, looking at what Denise Fort talked about earlier, looking at what Bonnie Watson Coleman talked about earlier. We have the degrees. The degrees are there. Black women are the most educated population of all groups in this country. However, we do not see that return on investment. What we see is debt upon debt upon debt. We graduate, we see less money when it comes to the offerings that we are given when we are actually sitting on the other side of that interview table. What we see is less money. What we see is less wealth. What we see are all of these issues associated with it. And the promise of higher ed, as great as it is, in the sense that there are certain opportunities that we honestly would not have. Those doors would have never opened if we didn't have that degree. We still have to come to grips with the fact that this student loan debt is crushing. And it is not only crushing for us, it's crushing for the generations that come after us. And I know that we have so much to talk about, so I don't want to take up too much of this time. I switched up the schedule just a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that we got some of those comments in. I am going to now turn to Victoria Jackson. Victoria Jackson was the lead researcher on our Black student debt briefs, our Black student debt reports, as well as our Black mental health brief that came out just a few weeks ago. She is going to go over a high-level overview of those, and then we're going to go into taking audience questions and turn it back to our panel. But before that, take it away, Victoria.
Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And I'm Victoria Jackson. I'm the Assistant Director of Higher Education Policy at the Education Trust. Today, I'll be going over information that comes from an EdTrust report and 2 EdTrust briefs that use data from the National Black Student Debt Study conducted by EdTrust and Dr. Jalil Bishop. The graph you can see on your screen shows average federal undergraduate and graduate borrowing by race and ethnicity. And as you can see, Black women are borrowing the most. Black women owe on average over $38,000 for a bachelor's degree a year after they complete, including their principal and interest. And on average, Black women owe a little over $52,000 for a graduate degree. Black women are shouldering the greatest burden from the high cost of college. College costs have risen dramatically over the past several years, in large part because state funding for public colleges and universities has declined. This occurred while wages were stagnant and while the federal Pell Grant lost purchasing power. For example, in 1980, the average cost of a public four-year college, which includes tuition, fees, and room and board, was $9,307 in 2019-2020 dollars. By 2019-2020 academic year, the average cost was over $25,000. And in 1980, the maximum Pell Grant covered more than 50% of the full cost of attendance at a public four-year college. And in 2021, it covered only 28%. And those factors create an environment that forced many students to borrow for their education. Next slide, pop up. And so this slide shows the amount borrowed for federal loans 12 years after a person starts college. And this is for people who began college in 2004. And as you can see here, that after 12 years, Black women owe 13% more than they originally borrowed, compared to white men who have paid off 44% of their debt. Black women are struggling so much to repay their debt because we have fewer resources because of racism and sexism. The gender and racial pay gaps are well documented, and Black women experience them no matter their education level. Black women must obtain a bachelor's degree or higher to earn more than a white man who has some college but no degree. In 2020, Black women aged 25 to 64 who hold bachelor's degree or higher, worked full-time year-round, had median earnings of a little over $60,000 a year, compared to white men who were earning nearly $92,000 per year, Black men earning a little over $75,000 per year, and white women who were earning a little over $67,000 per year. And also, and probably most importantly, Black women are struggling with repayment in large part because of the racial wealth gap. And the racial wealth gap is much larger than the racial wage gap because it shows the accumulated effects of slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, discrimination in lending, and labor market discrimination. In 2019, median wealth of a white household was $188,000 compared to a little over $24,000 for a Black household. And then I'm going to share some old data from 2013. It's from the panel study of income dynamics, but it allows us to look at Black women who have bachelor's degrees. And so for a college educated single Black woman, their median wealth at the time of the study was $5,000 compared to white women who had a median wealth of $35,000. And actually white women without a college degree had a median wealth of $8,000, which is $3,000 more than Black women with single Black women with a college education. And when we look at married college educated women, Black women had a median net worth of only $45,000 compared to $260,000 for white women. And so when we think about, the stress that is caused by, 12 years after you started college and you're not actually seeing any, decline in your balance, how demoralizing that can be, because many people are making payments and never seeing that balance go down. And so we know that student debt creates a lot of financial stress, and it has ripple effects throughout a person's life, including their mental health. There's research that shows that debt in general can harm mental health. And in particular, one study from 2015 looks at the impact of student loan debt on adults aged 25 to 31. And it found that having student loans is associated with poorer mental health. The graph on the screen shows the response of participants to the National Black Student Debt Study conducted by Ed Trust and Dr. Jalil Bishop. And also, just before I get into what you see on the screen, I just want to say that borrowers in the study, one of the things that they talked about was whether they had high balances or unaffordable monthly payments, or if they ever defaulted. We found a lot of people felt great psychological distress. People experienced depression, suicidal ideation, and sort of just overall sort of loss of hope for their future and for their life, in many cases for their children and other family members as well, because of the burden of the debt. The table on the screen is broken out by whether a borrower is in an income-driven repayment plan or not. Income-driven repayment plans are meant to lower monthly payments to make them affordable. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they don't. And they are based on a person's income, and that determines what the monthly payment will be. And if we look at the overall category on this table, you see that 64% of participants of this study, so there are about nearly 1,300 survey participants, agree that loans have negatively impacted their mental health. So 64% agree, 66% agree that loans impact their quality of life, and 76% agree that loans are the primary source of financial stress. And as you can see that for all of these people who are enrolled in IDR, which would indicate that they are at least experiencing some stress with making their standard monthly payment, so they have opted into this type of program, have higher rates of seeing that a negative impact on their life with student loans. And then finally, to wrap this up, we really want to ensure that policymakers are doing what they can to ensure that that we address the harm done from past failures and policies by canceling at least $50,000 in federal student loan debt. And 80% of the participants in the Black student debt study said they want the federal government to cancel all federal student loans without any restrictions. And also, in addition to that, we need to make sure that the federal government makes improvements to income-driven repayment plans, so those plans are more affordable for people, and so they don't create this sort of lifelong burden of student loan debt, which is what borrowers in the study said that income-driven repayment plans felt like to them. And then also, we want to ensure that we don't have a student debt crisis in the future, and policymakers can help that happen by doubling the Pell Grant, creating a federal and state partnership to make community college and four-year public colleges debt-free or tuition-free on a first dollar basis. And also, we need a student completion fund that's well-funded to ensure that students are not just able to get to college, but they're able to finish and complete their degrees. So, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. That was a lot to chew on. We can talk in circles day in and day out, but once you have the information before you, it cannot be denied. We have heard time and time again from individuals who feel as though forgiving student loan debt at any rate would only benefit the rich. That is an argument that is quite frankly false, and it is a narrative that is being pushed by a lot of right-wing media circles who honestly just don't want to see the playing field leveled. So when we see the information that Victoria just presented, when we hear from the experts here, when we hear from the student borrowers themselves, it paints a much different picture than what we're seeing, than what we're hearing from certain circles. With that being said, I want to bring the panel back because we do have some questions that we would like to get answered. First off is going to be your reaction, and I'll start with you, Dr. Shamel Bell, your reaction to some of the data that Victoria just presented.
Yes, first I would like to say Dr. Jalil Bishop is why I'm in this work the way that I am. I was on Good Morning America talking about Black women and student loan debt, and something that was said was like, what could I have done differently? And it overwhelmed me. And I was in a panic because, you know, I couldn't have done anything differently. I thought I did everything right. Right? You know, I went through all of the education. I was a A+ student, you know, and it's the gotcha that you still didn't do anything right. And it was like, okay, well, I had a child. And it was this idea that there were two things. Either they thought I was going to drop out of school when I graduated from college. I was a valedictorian of Black grad at USC and 4 months pregnant. I still went to Yale, did research in the summer, and then went to graduate school, kept going. But because our basic needs weren't met, it just in society, you have to take the double loans because, you know, I'm also South Central Los Angeles stand up, you know, first generation high school graduate, you know, low income, Section 8, welfare, all the things. My mother could not afford a Parent Plus loan. So I had to take double the loans. And so it was me talking about this story and talking about, you know, my son actually helps to save my life. But, you know, those loans, they don't talk about with that estimated, the EFC, when you have all of that. And I had full tuition scholarships to USC, by the way. And still, you know, because it's tuition. But what about
Mhm.
room and board? That's why I'm saying we need to talk about the intersection between why our basic needs are healthcare and, you know, all of these other things that should be a right. And so one of the things that was brought up is that there's this illusion that's happening for me. The systemic failure really needs to be pointed out. And this isn't a mistake or a mishap. You know, these are actual practices and policies that are disadvantaging us Black women and others, you know. And so if we continue to see it as, oh, education is not a right, and that if you go to a higher education, that's not a right, then we're failing to realize that this is actually intense and like intentional. And so I think it was Irma, you said something really, really powerful. And as someone that identifies as bipolar and speak out, that's why I have to write everything down. There's a lot of ableism that happens even within these movements. You know, this idea that they tell you all the time, well, you should get scholarships. That's saying that someone has the time, the effort. You were saying that everybody's A+ students. You know, I happen to be differently abled, and, you know, I don't know where this photographic memory, I don't know what happens, but I got through. But that is one of the things that I want to bring into these conversations. Aside from the statistics, I also want to talk about, you know, this, our solutions are sometimes ableist, right? To say, oh, we should do scholarships. And even this idea, we need to think about the most impacted. Even $50K is not enough. All of it should be canceled because it should not be there. You know, some people really want to pay for their loans. They're like, you know, got into debt. I want to pay. I've been canvassing, and people are also telling me like, no, I want to pay them back. I said, no, you shouldn't have it. Like, this burden shouldn't be yours. So that's my rant. But thank y'all for listening. And these conversations are incredible. And thank you to Dr. Jalil Bishop, because he contacted me to reach out to for the debt collective to reach out to me. And I'm their visionary escalator. So that's my title.
Nice. That's an awesome title. And thank you so much for sharing that. There is so much of your story that I think is going to really help people, but also bringing that ableism into the conversation, because I don't think that that's something that is often thought about at all, especially when it's not a physical disability. So I think that that's a conversation that we need to be more robust in having as well. So thank you for sharing that. From the chat box, we have a question, and I'm going to pitch this one to Lakila. What role do you see higher education institutions playing in transforming how they look at affordability for students? And how are they not offering loan options when students start their educational journey?
I think this is, to answer that question, I think we have to look at what coalition building means and what power means, and how we can collectively use our power as a coalition to advocate for just that, and advocate for whether it's a HBCU or a PWI, to look at like, what is education? Dr. Bell has been saying it. Why do loans exist? Like, at the end of the day, education should be viewed as your right. Like, you should be getting this for free. And, you know, talking about coalition building, I want to, you know, uplift the work that Portia and Patrice are doing at NAACP. And I can tell you Higher Heights loves to partner with NAACP every single chance we get, because they're doing the work. And I implore everyone here, regardless if your organization is a C3, C4, C6, C7, like, find an organization, a legacy organization that has the resources, the talents, the institutional foundations to actually partner with them to get work done. We can't do this by ourselves. Like, you can't go about this alone. Like, there's a space for all of us to thrive, to be leaders in our communities, but we have to do it together. And I applaud, and I'm mentioning NAACP because they bring everybody to the table. And they're here supporting this conversation tonight. And so whether it's a Black Girls Vote or Higher Heights Black Women Vote, like, we have to be, as Black women who are the defenders of our home, of our democracy, of our families, of our neighborhoods, we are leading in this moment. So we need to join together every single chance we get to protect our legacy and our future, to make sure that we are looking at this holistically, looking at education, the financial burdens of it, the physical burdens of it, the emotional and mental challenges of just being a Black woman. And, you know, what is this doing to our bodies, right? That's another conversation to that we can talk about the next time, right? Because this is just the first conversation, right? So the second time, maybe what is the burden of student loan debt, the burden of caring for our families while we're away from home, whether you're first generation or third generation, the pressure of taking care of everyone else. What is it doing to your body as a Black woman? What is that stress doing to you? What are fibroids doing? I mean, we can go down a rabbit hole all day long on this, but at the end of the day, we can't go about this alone, and coalition building and being in community and conversation is the key. And that's how you put pressure on these higher institutions of education.
And just a little plug, there is a student parent report that the Education Trust will actually be putting out on August 23rd. So be ready, be on alert, because all of you will get an email regarding that. And we are going to be very, very vigilant on elevating the voices of student parents, as well as, again, with what that burden is and what that actually means, and how they can be supported by institutions, as well as how our current system is not necessarily working with them or making it easier for parents to actually also be able to attain their degrees. So be on the lookout, that is coming. There's a very good question in the chat box, I believe, around what it actually means what canceling student debt means in practice. So I'm going to throw this one to Natasha and Black Girls Vote, because Natasha, Black Girls Vote has made cancel student debt for Black women, cancel all student debt for Black women, a pillar, and it's an action item for you all. Why did you choose that as an action item? Also, why do you believe that there should not be debt limits or there should not be income limits on student debt cancellation?
Yeah, great question, Amisha, as well as the folks who dropped it in the chat. Really, we made this a pillar because to us, canceling all student debt for Black women represents economic freedom. It is the reality. It's kind of the fulfilling that promise that was mentioned earlier about, what higher education is supposed to bring to fruition. So it's supposed to be economic security, flexibility, the freedom to exist fully and thrive in this country. And so it's on that basis that, Black Girls Vote definitely is continuing the call for the cancellation of all student loan debt for Black women. But in addition to that, we recognize that there have been recent calls, for some proposals to place income limits. I've seen it, for folks earning more than $125,000, they shouldn't be eligible for any type of debt forgiveness. And we find that to be a very problematic approach. We recognize that, yes, Black women are plagued by income inequality. However, for those who have achieved a certain tax bracket, we know that oftentimes those resources don't just sit for ourselves or within our homes. We really are supporting the larger community, be it on the micro level or the macro level. And those individuals are just as deserving, for having their loans forgiven and canceled as well.
And as was said in the chat box, income is not wealth. What we do know is that when it comes to doctors, when it comes to lawyers, Black people in those positions are less than 2% of that population. That says something about the level of service and the level of equity that we also receive in our community. We know that having somebody who looks like you be your doctor is a very different experience than having someone who doesn't. Having someone who looks like you defending you in a broken criminal justice system makes a difference. And that those individuals, even though, they come out and they're in careers that some people see as a lot more lucrative, when in all honesty, in the legal field, a lot of people who graduate go into public service legal careers anyway. So they're not making the six figures that on average people assume that they are. But even for those who are, they don't come from the types of family backgrounds and family wealth that is designed to afford them housing while they're in school. I know that from personal experience and also from several people who are currently on this panel, that not everyone is getting checks from their parents while they're going through college. Not everyone is having their parents put money down on their first home. Not everyone's parent is buying them a car, paying for their weddings, or helping them with their children. In many cases, all of this falls on you. And when all of that happens and you have to figure out how to, make it all work at the same time, which I will give it to my sisters, Black women are able to do some magic. At the end of the day, we shouldn't have to be magicians our entire lives. And we have to be very, very real about that because of the mental health, the mental health aspects and implications that come along with that. I will go back to you, Irma, on this one as well. when it comes to student borrowers who are having those traumatic experiences, who feel as though, you know, they're being crushed by the weight of the world of the student loan debt, and trying to keep their heads above water, and being able to take care of their homes, and being able to find childcare, all of those expenses associated with that, and this mass inflation that we're seeing across the United States right now. What is some of your advice to those people? Because we're still waiting. As we talked about at the top of this call, we're still waiting. We know that there's been signaled from the White House, from the administration, that we might hear something about student loan forgiveness up to that 10K point before the end of the month, before the restart of the payment pause. But right now, we're kind of still in limbo. What are some of the advisements that you would possibly give people who may be having mental health crises or are close to it right now?
Yeah, I think that this moment has exacerbated like COVID-19 and the ongoing pandemic that we are still in, right? That continues. To COVID is not coming back, but it has been here and we've been in it. It continues to exacerbate the issue of mental health across the nation, period, right? So numbers have gone up to 1 in 5 folks now are saying that they experience a mental health crisis or a mental health challenge during this pandemic. And we know that those numbers are substantially, right, vastly more impactful for African-American communities, but it is vastly underreported because of stigma, because of isolation, because of social historical exploitation and manipulation for our communities when it comes to health and wellness and mental health and wellness. And so what we try to encourage folks through initiatives at NAMI, such as Sharing Hope, is to find community, as I said, where you can have these honest conversations, right? And you can really express your experience, right? A part of coping really is about being able to feel affirmed in your experience. There is a very specific experience, intersectional trauma, that is experienced by Black communities that needs space to be voiced. And before we go outside the community to have these conversations where those sacred stories can be exploited, we need an opportunity to have these conversations in community so that those stories and experiences can be affirmed. So that will be the first thing, just finding community and find spaces to express yourself. I know that mental health and social media not all the time mixes, but I think the opportunity on social media to highlight and illuminate the intersectional experience, right, and the particular oppression that Black communities have experienced, it's been something of power for us. It's been a tool for us. And so using some of those things to find folks who share your collective experience can serve you. I think also being able to connect with local movements. NAMI has affiliates that are local, right? And so I'll drop that in the chat where you can find your local NAMI affiliate and you can get connected to family support, right? Family to family support, peer-to-peer support. You can also get connected to resources that will help you find the language to articulate what you are feeling, right? And so I think that those kinds of tools can really serve us in this moment, as well as being able to say, I am not okay, right? And this experience is not okay. I know folks talk a lot about affirmations and the I am statements that can be very powerful, but I've been telling folks, especially Black folks, especially Black women, to get in tune with the I am not statements. I am not at capacity to have this conversation right now. I am not at capacity to go to this meeting today, right? I am not at capacity to take care of this or cook dinner tonight. I am not. Those things serve us in more ways than one. And it's okay for us to begin to turn the tide and change the culture, right? So that we don't have to just be magicians, but we can actually start to humanize ourselves in our experience.
Thank you so much for that. And just a word of note for anyone who qualifies or is in a public service loan forgiveness program, make sure that if your previous loans within a public service loan that fall under public service loan forgiveness are actually taken into account as they are counting those payments, that you fill out your paperwork by October 31st. State attorney generals across the country are coming together to try to push the hand of the administration to extend that deadline. But right now, what we know is that October 31st is the standing deadline. So make sure that you are filling out that paperwork, that you are getting those employer signatures so that those payments that you made actually count and are benefited towards your forgiveness numbers, because that is a really important thing. And right now, it looks like that is a pretty hard deadline until we hear otherwise. So again, make sure October 31st is not that far around the corner. So public service individuals, those who've worked for nonprofits, those who've worked in government, those who are teachers, those who fit within that 501c3 framework, or again, government workers of all types, make sure that you are filling out that paperwork and that you are getting it back, getting that sent back as soon as you can. As somebody who really, full disclosure, I turned mine in this week. This is a very real and serious thing. So again, make sure that you get that in as soon as you can. We have another question in the chat box, and I am going to push this one to Lakila. How can we protect our young women who are graduating during these tumultuous times from entering these debt vicious cycles without making them compromise on their educational dreams?
So I'm going to always go back to, Black women being caregivers, but us also being mentors and providing a space for young Black women to have honest, safe conversations, but also, Higher Heights is a political home for Black women, right? So I'd be remiss to not talk about ensuring that we are electing Black women who believe in the policies and the ideas that we all believe in that are going to take us to higher heights. So a part of that is having honest conversations, investing in young Black leaders, investing in young Black women, and actually having conversations and providing them resources so that they don't have to compromise. We don't have to make a choice, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other. They can still attain educational goals without sacrificing their well-being, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, financial. We should be able to have it all, just like our counterparts can. So often, like you said, Black women are having to be magicians. No, we are not a mess. We are not a little thing in a bottle that you can rub and all of a sudden it's voila. No, we are used to, and we should not have to be accustomed to dealing with sustained high intensity trauma. If you SHIT, no, that's breaking us down internally. People talk about Black don't crack. Listen, we are cracking on the inside. Regardless of how we look on the outside, we are cracking on the inside, and that has to stop. So I say that to say, again, community conversation, building with organizations that have a legacy, organizations that have access to capital, right? So this is all a conversation about how do we build our own Black political power? How do we invest in our communities? What do we do to do that? And that also includes making sure that our elected representatives look like us and they value the policies that are important to Black women in our communities. And supporting organizations that do too, whether they are legacy or whether they just came and were created 5 weeks ago. But it's important though, for us to invest in our legacy organizations because they've been there, they've done that, they have the resources, and we have to put ego aside. You can merge old and new and make something phenomenal. And that's what we have to do.
I really, really like that point, especially because a lot of our legacy organizations have not only been leading this charge for a while, but they have that brain trust and they have the trust of the community. They have the trust of the voters. They are people who can push this narrative forward and can push things forward in advocacy that in many ways might be harder for a newer organization or an organization that has not had as many tentacles in the community. So we want to make sure that we're bridging those gaps and bringing them together as well. And we're getting close to our wrap-up time, but before we do, I wanted to get something from each of you around, and we're going to bring you in as well, Velma, around what the administration and what the administration as well as institutions can do, not only to eradicate student loan debt, but current student loan debt, because these trillions aren't going anywhere without help. But also to keep us from being in the exact same place, because I have seen some naysayers who are also saying, okay, well, let's say we wipe student loan debt tomorrow. The Biden administration is not going to do that, by the way. Let's say we wipe student loan debt tomorrow. What does that mean for people who are graduating in 2020, 2025, in 2030, in 2045? What does it mean for this next generation? Because the high cost of college education will still be there. So college affordability, in addition to student loan debt, are real worries, particularly for the Black community, where we know that opportunity is oftentimes hard to find, But in addition to that, we need those degrees. We would be remiss to say that those degrees aren't needed, but you're also having this opportunity cost as well. So policy-wise, what are some of the solutions that you would like to see? And I'll start with Natasha first.
Great, thanks, Amisha. I think one of the first thing that comes to mind for me, like you said, is addressing this problem holistically. While of course we would love and will continue to advocate for President Biden to, leverage an executive order power to cancel and erase student loan debt for, existing individuals. But we do recognize that if we don't tackle this at its root and its core, then we'll be here in, another 5 years, 10 years. And so to address that holistically, we recommend that policymakers at all levels make investments into education from primary all the way through higher education in an effort to better prepare our students, for the 21st century academic environment and subsequent workplace, but also providing current institutions of higher learning with the resources that they need, so they're not trying to rob from Peter to pay Paul and pass those costs down to their students.
And Dr. Bell.
Yeah, you just took it right out of my mouth. I was discussing that in my mind. He can cancel it, but what about the future? I think that I've been pointing to the policies and practices that this system is set up, and it's working quite perfectly for them. The fact that school has been turned into a corporation or just like a factory for, more, I hate if I'm getting too radical, white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist society, like all those big terms, right? That's what we're turning out in this hierarchical structure. So that's where we need to do the most work, is to discuss how we can decorporatize, is that a word, y'all? I don't know, it works. Education, and also talk about, again, let's go back to, we don't have our basic needs met. So some people go into college as a form of survival. So how can we have resources and access to resources where, the college situation wouldn't be the only way that you would get an apartment or possibly eat and all of those different things. So I think that we need to have a conversation that goes alongside of it being intentional. So once people get that in their minds, because I think that we're attacking it from the wrong perspective. Once we understand that it's a systemic issue, then I think that we'll do a better job of having free education like it once was before it started to look more like us.
Keeping it 100. That's why I appreciate you, Dr. Bell. Lakila.
I appreciate everything that has already been said, so I'm not going to take too much time on the pulpit to preach to a choir that's already been preached to all day long. But I do want to talk about the need for financial literacy, investment in our land, like in HBCUs, like those of us that have it, like invest in scholarships, like give back to institutions that are really nurturing our students. Like, listen, I'm not telling you got to donate $100 a month, $500 a month. If you can do 20 a month to somebody's institution, that's better than nothing. Teaching people about tax vehicles that can set their children up for financial, liberation in the future, but it's literacy programs at the end of the day. And again, making sure that we have people in elected offices that look like us and that care about our future and liberation and freedom, because that's what it is. Education has to be an equalizer for us. And right now it isn't, but it has to be. And the only way we're going to get there is if we change how we look at it. So Dr. Bell, thank you for saying that. We have to change how we look at it. We do. At the end of the day, we have to change how we look at education.
And Irma, I know you're in the pursuit of another degree right now. What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, send all of those good vibes. I mean, the reality is that the administration, I think, it's time for America to address not just the external factors of white supremacist, heteronormative, right, patriarchy, but the internal impact of the lived experience of Black people under that sort of oppression, right? And the investment in healthcare and also affordable access, right? Culturally, competent, affordable access to mental health and emotional health and healthcare, right? When Black folks, even those with degrees that can navigate some of these bureaucracies that is the healthcare system, when they try to go and find someone, the 90% of the psychology field is white, and majority of it is male. And so you don't have anybody that can understand your experience. You don't have anybody that can really speak your language. They don't understand when you say, I've been on 100 all week. They don't understand that's not a good thing, right? And so you can't get the treatment that you need. And so there needs to be investment in the internal impact of a lived experience as a Black person in America. And that needs to be in terms of healthcare and in mental and emotional wellness.
And I'm going to add to that a little bit before I get to you, Velma. As somebody who, again, was a first generation college student with an incarcerated parent, my mom died in prison my freshman year of college. And my baby brother committed suicide 4 months afterwards. He was 11 years old. The counselor they assigned to me at my school was a white man who not only did not understand how to talk to me, but also was so, I don't think intentionally offensive, but was very offensive in the sense of basically he told me that I just needed to go home, that college probably wasn't for me, and that I needed to basically figure out my life and take some time and do, and talked about other possible career options that didn't involve going to school. It was hurtful. It was tragic. On top of losing two people that meant everything to me, it would also put me off to mental health and mental health supports, because I assume that if this is a person who's telling somebody who still has a teen behind their age at this point, that this is what they need to do, then I don't need to be a part of this. Like, I felt very offended and was quite frankly very hurt. So I do think, to your point, Irma, that those things matter. Having somebody who looks like you, who is reflective of your community, who understands a lot of what you've gone through and how to emotionally connect to you and culturally connect to you is extremely important, especially when you're going through the college process, because your emotional stability, a lot of the things that you have to do during that, especially for us Black women who are often sending money back home, not getting money from home sent to us, who are in many cases taking care of kids or other family members and being in that sandwich generation and having to do all of those things, in addition to not having a college going culture in the sense that there are people there to tell you how to navigate through this process. Being first generation means a lot and it's exciting, but it also means that you're the first person who's going to figure all this stuff out on your own. And there isn't always somebody there to guide you. You need that level of support, and support not only in choosing the classes and the courses that you need to take, but also support in acknowledging the culture that you come from, affirming the culture you come from, and the heartbreak that can often happen during your time in college. So thank you so much, Irma. Sorry, for adding, but I know that like what you said.
I appreciate your story. Yes.
And Velma, I congratulate you for being a part of this. Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. Again, as someone who has been a student, gone through that for-profit process, not one, two, but three times. Those hurdles are what they are. Being a single mom and still working through this and doing, job to job, trying to do the best that you can for your kids. I think that Black women specifically feel that, but I also know that it is a very common story amongst our people. For you, what do you wish the administration would do so that other people don't have to go through what you went through? Or how can the administration, how can Congress be a better help to Black women who are going through the college process or seeking higher education for their families, for their community, to help become that economic driver that we know we have to be?
Oh, I just have to respect everything you guys have said. Foremost, it's amazing, because sometimes you think you're alone in situations like this, and again, like you said, not going once or twice or three times, but it's because I'm not giving up. It doesn't matter what is it exactly that they put in front of me. I know there's something out there that I need to be doing. Okay, now, and this is the reason why I want to become a social worker. So one of the things that it eagers me to change it is the application process, right? The whole, what is your sex? Or like, what is your nationality? Where you come from? What language do you speak to? Why does that matter when I'm trying to fill up an application? And I feel that that's when everything starts. It starts from that one application when they ask you questions that, to me personally, is no relevance. Why does it matter my color and what I speak? if all I want to do is get my education. So things like that in applications should just get removed, you know, because I feel like that's when it starts, when the whole, oh, she's Black or she's Hispanic. I'm actually both. I'm a Hispanic woman. Okay, so I speak both languages, and of course I'm a Black woman. So I identify with both. Okay, so I had to experience everything that you guys could imagine, and everything you guys have described today here tonight. It couldn't hit more at home, you know. So questions like, you know, where you come from, what color you is, it doesn't matter what it is. Things like that should be removed from applications. It shouldn't matter at all whatsoever. Also the fine prints, you know, it's like so many of us don't read the fine prints. And I'm also a first generation college student, so I am figuring it out on my own. And I guess I failed 3 times, you know, and hopefully the 4th time is not going to happen. But the fine prints, we're not used to reading fine prints. You're selling us a dream, and it's like, oh wow, it sounds beautiful. Why? What else is it for me to hear? What is it? I'm just going to sign, right? Until you get caught up with everything else that's in the background that no one else explained to you what was going to happen afterwards. You know, so you keep going into this hamster wheel like I've been doing for years, you know, trying to find myself and trying to find my future. So just irrelevant questions that shouldn't be in paperwork, just remove them. It doesn't matter. All we want is a bright future, a successful future, equality, respect, and honor. That's it.
And with that, and I am thankful to every single person on this panel. I have to give a shout out to our partner in this work. We had a conversation with Black Girls Vote a few months ago and came together and said, we want to do an event on Black women's student debt. We had a brief coming out here at Ed Trust that was also encircled around mental health, and we wanted to bring that part into the conversation. So I reached out to NAMI. They thankfully, you know, joined on excitedly and wanted to be a part of it. Talked to Higher Heights. I basically just threw it out there. I was hopeful that y'all would join, didn't know if it was going to happen. Lakila was very, very happy to accept an invitation and wanted to be a part of this. It has been an amazing experience. Dr. Bell, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for your exuberance here on this panel, but also really bringing things home. It has been exciting to work with each and every one of you. This has been recorded, so we're going to be able to share it after this. It was also live streamed on Facebook, so we had an audience beyond this as well. And again, look forward to continued engagement. We have a long way to go, but we have a lot of fighters here, not only on this panel, but also people who are listening and people who are engaged in their communities and doing their best to make sure that Black women's voices are upheld, making sure that they're doing their best to invest in our communities and to promote the next generation of leaders. A lot of those leaders are primed and prepped through the college process. We want to make sure that they're not soured on it because of what's happening with student loan debt. We want to make sure that the next generation of student leaders will be able to go and pursue the education they need to walk into the access and opportunity that is all too often taken away from Black people. But to do that, we don't want them to be saddled with student loan debt for generations to come either. So again, thank you to everyone who was on our panel. Velma, again, for your student debt story, for being willing to share it with us and being as vulnerable as you have been during this conversation. I really thank you for that. Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, thanks for the video. And of course, to again, our fearless leader and interim president right here, interim CEO right here at the Education Trust, Denise Fort. And to everyone who has listened to this tonight, thank you so much.